For the past 12 years, I've been racing sports cars in the World Championship and at Le Mans, but they never looked like anything you could take on the road. They're more like Grand Prix cars covered in bodywork. But now there are moves afoot to return to racing production-based sports cars. Supercars like Ferrari's F40, Lamborghini's Diablo, the new McLaren F1 and the Bugatti. The first race for this new category was at Le Mans this year, where British interest centred on entries from Jaguar and Lotus. The Lotus is based on their new flagship, the 300 Sport. To put both road cars and race cars to the test, we took to the Silverstone South Circuit for some high-speed lappery. The 300 Sport is based on the Esprit S4, and these are currently the only two models that the Bugatti-owned Lotus company produce. Power is up from 264 bhp to just over 300, hence the name. There's a distinctive high rear wing, flared wheel arches, bigger tyres and bigger brakes. Whilst it may feel stiffly sprung on the open roads, the 300 Sport is actually too soft for circuit use, rolling into oversteer when pushed hard. Moving up from the Esprit to the 300 takes the price up £18,000 to £65,000. Mind you, you can have half a dozen of them for the price of one of these, a new XJ220 that will give you an extra 240 horsepower to play with. In a straight line, the acceleration seems endless, and this is still officially the fastest production car in the world at 212 miles an hour. You cannot help but feel good when you sit in this beautifully crafted, superbly finished rocket ship, and yet to drive it on the limit is something of a disappointment. It's a big car, and it feels big. It's a heavy car, and it feels heavy, with no power assistance for either the brakes or the steering. So what is the difference between the road cars and their racing brothers? Well, the Lotus runs to almost standard production GT regulations. That means it's got the same bodywork, the same panels made of the same materials. They are allowed certain extensions to the spoilers front and rear and some louvers to help the cooling. But inside, they even have to keep the standard Alcantara dashboard. But underneath, they are allowed racing gearbox, racing suspension, racing brakes and racing wheels and tyres. The Jaguar runs to slightly more modified regulations, which means they're able to replace the aluminium bodywork with removable carbon composite panels, which helps lighten the car and ease access. Inside, the cockpit is stripped bare to full racing specification. Once again, there's racing suspension, tyres and brakes. But Jaguar have kept the standard 5-speed gearbox. Time to get changed. Now this racing version of the Lotus has only actually got about 80 horsepower more than the road-going version. There's actually an air restrictor on the engine intake in this formula to stop power levels going too high, but that extra 80 horsepower, allied to the fact that the car is about 150 kilos lighter, means that, as you've just seen, the car is quite a frisky little prospect. On most racing cars, especially rear-wheel drive ones, it's not something you need. So you get all the feedback of the road through the steering. And actually the Lotus feel is a little bit dead here. Brakes, again, you've lost your servo assistance, but they feel very good indeed. The racing gearbox is a light, it's a real quick change.
Le Mans was the first outing for the 300 Sport, and with little development time behind them, the two cars entered both dropped out with engine trouble, but not before they'd impressed with their speed. Even more impressive was the more developed three-car Jaguar entry, but they also had two cars retire, but one survived. Now this is the car that finished first at Le Mans here in that GT category. It finished 15th overall, and I guess you'd expect a car that won Le Mans to feel good, but this feels even better. The car is so solid and confidence-inspiring, and that's what really helps at Le Mans. It doesn't feel like it's going to suddenly snap sideways. It's not going to suddenly bite me. The steering is fairly heavy, which is why the steering wheel has moved so near to the driver to help him get the leverage. But the actual power of the racing Jaguar is less than the power of the road-going car. Now that's because of those Le Mans restrictors. But what the team has done is they've taken over 400 kilos of weight out of the standard road car. So obviously the performance is improved. But when you add the racing suspension, racing brakes, and of course those racing tyres, it's still amazing that we're lapping this tight Silverstone South circuit some 12 seconds faster than in the road car.
But, as ever, just when I started enjoying myself, it was time to hand the beauty back. Well, having tried these two exciting new cars, I've got no doubt now that this GT category can form the basis of a really good World Sports Car Championship.